Well, for more on this, let's cross back to London, where Arise business analyst Bode Ososami is on standby. Thank you for staying with us, Bode. Let's talk about Janet Yellen. She's in Beijing. What are we hearing today? Could you bring us up to date with this visit?
Well, I think the context of the visit, Hawaii, is very important. The Chinese economy, as you know, has not been faring as well as expected. Only recently, yesterday, Premier Li Qiang pledged to spare no time in implementing what he called targeted stimulus, but offered no specifics on what he's promising, targeted, comprehensive, and well-coordinated measures to get growth back. You have a weak property market, youth unemployment at record highs, household and business confidence is sluggish. So Yellen will perhaps be tactful in passing her message without complicating current economic irritations. And of course, she wants to deepen communication and work towards a more stable and constructive relationship, while making it clear that Washington won't take nonsense as far as human rights and its national security interests are concerned. There is a huge market in China that the US cannot deny. And the important thing is to be able to position a narrative that allows China to welcome that entry into that market. But clearly the tensions are there. But what harm can a very polite, older, well-respected lady like Yellen do as she keeps communication friendly? And the trip has to be a good thing, especially for China facing US and chip stocks like Micron Technologies, Intel. Of course, export-reliant Europe will be watching, nervous to see that the trade relations do not worsen, as they continue to say they are de-risking and cannot afford to decouple. Yellen repeated that they would like to see market reforms in China. Well, they've been saying that for a long time. And she continued to repeat China's unfair economic practices. And she met with US companies doing business in China and the former Chinese economic chief, Liu He, and also is going to meet with Premier Li Qiang. I understand Biden and Xi Jinping may meet in Delhi at the G20 meeting in September or later in November at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Gathering. So far, I would say so good. Obviously, China will match the rhetoric with their own gripes. Biden administration's plans to limit US companies' China's investments at a time when China's economy is recovering more slowly and they need those investments badly. So we'll see how it goes, but things couldn't be worse. And these kinds of meetings certainly can be helpful.
Helpful indeed. Now, predictably, Musk is threatening to sue Meta over threats. Will Meta back off at this rate, do you think?
Well, they say copying is the sincerest form of flattery, but of course, Musk doesn't agree. And he aims to throw every legal obstacle he can find in the way of Meta as they sign up to Threads. I understand revs up. Alex Spiro is doing his job to put Meta on alert. Meta has had a lot of practice in copying players. Reels, for example, copies TikTok almost perfectly, built into Instagram, and of course they got away with it. So nobody believes Twitter is going to make much progress. And Meta is also not the first platform to go after Twitter. Twitter has received competition from Mastodon, Blue Sky, among others. So the courts really would have a tough job deciding if Meta has cheated, although lawyers say Musk also has a very weak case. Twitter would need to provide more detail than what we have in the letter, prove that indeed Meta went after its staff. And of course, Meta has said there is nobody on the Threads team that worked on Twitter. And Twitter will also need to show that they made reasonable efforts to protect their corporate secrets and that Meta deliberately circumvented these efforts. So I don't think it's going to be an easy situation. It will be in the courts for a while. But I think Musk can find synergies and build on ventures where he has advantage to profitably upend and disrupt markets, stepping up innovation, but he cannot expect other players like Meta to watch as he seizes the opportunity in the social media market. Musk is also a relatively newcomer to this space, but he likes a good fight and is used to winning. And let's see what happens this time around.
Oh, we'll definitely see what happens with this grudge match between Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. All right, let's switch to Nigeria, where we're seeing some executive orders being signed. This was yesterday in order to reduce this burden of taxes. And also we're getting news of lower PMIs in the week. What's your take on the Tinubu reform era so far? As some have called it hurried, others have really applauded it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association just said the decision to suspend implementation of the Finance Act 2023 will foster a more conducive business environment and reduce the cost of doing business. I agree entirely with that. The business environment and all the reforms they've been trying to introduce to enhance that environment has been, I think, helpful. Measures like removing fuel subsidies, deregulating the FX market will also help. We also understand oil companies can now sell FX to banks. So a lot of the barriers and controls on FX market and rates are now being eliminated as we're now getting a willing buyer, willing seller platform. But my take is that though the corrective actions were overdue and certainly positive, we should wait, I would say, at least 90 days to comment on the broader trends. We will get an inflation data print on the 15th of February, which should show inflation going up. And of course, the impact of inflation is to dampen growth. But we'll eventually begin to see the impact of reduced demand on fuel prices and the appreciation of the dollar much, much later. It will be, however, a marathon, not a dash. That's a favorite cliche, but it's true. The government should be wise to communicate as such to avoid creating false expectations. One thing I must say as a change consultant is that there is a concept called the change curve, where change experts expect the initial impact of change that will take a situation to a higher performance equilibrium to be a downward plunge initially. This is because costly adjustments and high initial pain factors that tend to play in quickly and earlier than the positive outcomes, which tend to come slower and later, would of course result in a short-term downturn. So this concept is well accepted, and that is why change strategists introduce general sweeteners and palliatives and persist in communicating longer-term gains. But of course, they also need to be very sensitive to the short-term pain. So this is the time to watch out for policy flip-flops. In change, they call it the valley of despair, where you actually go down. You need to make that valley as short as possible so that you can come out. And factors like how you navigate your change, the sponsorship, quality of leadership, all help in coming out of that valley. We will get expansion in supply of goods, but it may take months for that to reflect in activity, which is why to succeed requires a long-term focus. In conclusion, I haven't seen any obvious policy missteps. I think more sensitivity needs to be given to palliatives and sharing the pain to bear costs, which is what citizens will be expecting. And the imperative to radically slash cost of governance, I think, is just too important. Embrace zero tolerance for waste and, of course, zero tolerance for corruption. Law and order is also very important. We shouldn't have extrajudicial interventions justified by the context. And let me just say this. Key apex institutions like the central bank must be respected and remain independent to perform unhindered, even as appointments to lead these institutions have to be very, very carefully looked at. But like I said, it's a good start. I agree with what everyone has said. Let's give it 90 days and watch how the early stages of reform and policy correction are executed and the kind of courage that is there for more institutional reform, which will take a longer time to put in place. But President Tinubu has definitely harvested some low-hanging fruit here, but that will not be enough.
You're right. Of course, transparency is also key in all the policy reforms as well. Bode Ososami, our Rise News business analyst, I'd like to thank you very much for the update on those issues. Good to have you with us.